News 8 at 5 starts now.
He believes that we're all fellow pilgrims and that we can learn from one another along the way. That is something that I think is going to be part of his lasting legacy.
People all over the world are mourning the death of Pope Francis tonight. History's first Latin American pope died this morning due to a stroke and heart failure in his residence inside Vatican City.
Now, his passing comes less than a day since he made a public appearance at St. Peter's Square for Easter Sunday. Pope Francis led the Catholic Church for more than 11 years. He advocated heavily for immigrants, refugees, and the poor. Even in his final hours, he called for an end to wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and the Sudan.
As soon as he became Pope, he didn't stay inside the church in the Vatican. He went out, he visited people he knew as an ordinary person. So he really acted as an ordinary person.
We have team coverage for you tonight, but first we start with Washington correspondent Lee Waldman, who brings us the latest on the Holy Father's death. Lee.
Dear brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis.
Hours after giving the Easter blessing in front of thousands of Catholics in St. Peter's Square,
Buona Pasqua.
Pope Francis died at his residence at 88 years old. In his final message, the Holy Father called for an end to wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan. His death now sparks 9 days of mourning for Catholics and an outpouring of love from across the globe.
I remember when he called me when my mom died. I remember when he called me during COVID to find out how God's people here in New York were doing.
Pope Francis's papacy was unprecedented in many ways by being more inclusive, supporting same-sex civil unions, and his tireless advocacy for migrants. He's remembered by many as the people's pope.
The pope of the poor, the pope of the marginalized, underprivileged. He's also what I'm going to call a reformer pope, because he made a lot of changes to the way the Vatican is run, the way the church is run.
He was a good man. Loved the way he was with the poor.
People can understand each other and not be against each other, and can disagree but could still love each other. And I think that was good, that he brought that to the table.
Pope Francis's death comes weeks after he was released from the hospital after battling a life-threatening case of pneumonia in both lungs. In New York, I'm Lee Waldman.
As Catholics around the world mourn the death of Pope Francis, the Vatican is preparing for what comes next. First, the Pope's funeral will take place within 1 week. The process of selecting a new Pope will then begin when a conclave is convened. That happens between 15 and 20 days after Francis's passing. The conclave can last up to 13 days. The new pontiff will then be installed less than a week after he is elected. We're working to get reaction from the Archdiocese of Indianapolis and other Catholics across the state.
Well, we turn now to IT-Mate's Cody Fisher. He's live outside of Saints Peter and Paul Cathedral with how Catholics here in Indiana are mourning the death of Pope Francis. Cody.
Guys, the Archdiocese of Indianapolis tells me that there's going to be a special mass here at the cathedral this evening in memory of Pope Francis. Now, I caught up with a few Catholics earlier today who told me they're going to miss him.
Cari fratelli e sorelle.
That was the final Easter blessing of Pope Francis's life. The excitement of the holiest day of the Catholic faith was replaced by a different emotion less than 24 hours later.
I was very sad.
It's a day of mourning, you have a loss.
The Catholics I spoke with decided to spend their lunch break praying for Pope Francis.
I hoped he found peace in an eternal resting place up in heaven with the Lord.
While praying for him, they also reflected on his 12 years of being Pope.
His concern for the poor, people that were voiceless, that couldn't speak for themselves, and his love of immigrants, and that's a very controversial issue today, but he was unwavering in support.
He was the shepherd that guided us into this new world that we're facing, the new normals that we face on a day-to-day basis, and I think his legacy will be strong and remembered as one of peace and acceptance and love.
Within the next month, a conclave of cardinals will elect the next pope. One Catholic I spoke with has a simple hope for who will be picked.
Just one that looks to do good in this world.
Now, with Pope Francis's death, it also starts a 9-day novena, which is 9 days of prayer for his soul. Baron, back to you.
Now, Cody, you actually told us you got an opportunity to meet Pope Francis. How did that happen, and what was the experience like?
Well, Farron, it was really quite a special moment. It was actually on my honeymoon last October. My wife and I did something called Spousey Novelli, and we actually have a picture of that right now. But basically what that means is any newly married couple can go to Rome and have a blessing from the Pope. And we were there in St. Peter's Square, right next to the Basilica near the front. And after the normal visitation with the Pope, where there is a blessing that he gives, he kind of came around in a wheelchair and blessed us and several hundred other newlyweds. So it was really quite a special thing, and something that my wife and I will remember for the rest of our lives.
All right, IT Mate's Cody Fisher. Cody, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
Cody, thank you. We now turn to News 8's Raina Revel, who talks with Hoosiers about Pope Francis as being the first leader of the Catholic Church from Latin America. Raina.
I spoke with the leader of the Hispanic ministry for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, who called Pope Francis's death unexpected, especially during this celebratory season. He emphasized how the Pope's inclusive approach and compassion deeply resonate within the Hispanic community.
Seeing Pope Francis passing from this life to a new dimension of life where he is united with Jesus Christ, and this is beautiful.
Catholic Hoosiers in various dioceses within Indiana are taking time to honor the Pope's 12-year papacy.
Pope Francis has been very intentional when being close to the people, not only in the physical aspect, but also in the spiritual accompaniment of those who are marginalized and the poor.
Eva Maria Camacho with Radio Latina is a Jesuit University graduate. She shares that Pope Francis held a special place in her heart for his advocacy on issues impacting the Hispanic community.
Precisely that example of empathy, closeness, and concern for others seems to me to be one of his most important legacies.
Pope Francis is known as the first Latin American pope. He was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1936. After being named to the papacy, he never had a chance to return to his home country.
Without a doubt, it has been a very important time for the Catholic Church in the continuity with this relationship that it also has with Latin America.
Every time we come to the Eucharist, every Sunday Mass, I think we should remember Pope Francis' invitation to become one with Christ and with one another.
Reporting in Indianapolis, I'm Raina Revel for Wish TV, wishtv.com, or follow us on Facebook for updates.
Well, members of the Indiana legislature are remembering Pope Francis. They talked about what set him apart from his predecessors. Listen.
He was willing to forgive people, and he was willing to look at people as a whole. I remember that great quote on the airplane when they asked him about homosexuality, and he expressed respect and decency and ended by saying, "Who am I to judge?" I think that was the greatest line he uttered. And he, because he disagreed with somebody or the way they lived their life, didn't mean he thought they were less human. That's just fabulous. That's a model for all of us.
Well, I think with this Pope in particular, you saw a Pope that was maybe a little more responsive to societal issues. Again, that's why I chuckled a little bit earlier. Sometimes those crossed with some political ideologies that weren't in a lot of agreement, certainly with many of us here in America and many of us in Republican circles.
Now, we have got much more on the passing of Pope Francis online right now at wishtv.com. Just scan that QR code you see on your screen. That will take you to the As Seen On section of our website. There you will find more local reaction on the Pope's passing, a timeline for what's next at the Vatican, and a photo gallery remembering the Pope.